You are watching your child sleep, not with tenderness tonight, with worry, because something is different, not dramatically different, not the kind of different a doctor would write down or a teacher would flag in a report, just the particular, quiet different that a parent knows before they know why they know it. The child who used to run to the door when you came home now doesn't look up. The child who slept through the night now wakes at 2 in the morning, sits up in the dark, and stares at a corner of the room as if they can see something there that you cannot. The child who ate everything now refuses food for reasons they cannot explain. You take them to the doctor. Normal. You take them to a second doctor. Normal. You describe the symptoms, you describe the behavior, you describe the particular way their eyes look in the morning, tired in a way that sleep should have fixed but didn't. And you hear the same word from every direction. Normal. And still, something is not right. A parent who has ever felt that specific knowing, that insistence that what they are seeing is real even when the instruments say otherwise, has been there, alone with it. Solomon wrote about this, not as theology, not as a comfort, as a diagnostic manual. And the reason nobody told you about it is not that the texts are obscure. They are not obscure. They have been sitting in the Western canon for over 1700 years. The reason nobody told you is that what they describe requires a parent to take seriously something they cannot photograph. Tonight, I am going to show you what the texts actually say. Let me begin where the Testament of Solomon begins. Because the opening scene of the most significant demonological text in Western history is not a king commanding armies. It is not Solomon receiving wisdom on his throne. It is not a confrontation with a great power. It is a boy dying. A young foreman on Solomon's construction site, a boy Solomon valued, a boy doing skilled work on the temple project. Every night, the text says, the boy would lose half his wages. That alone sounds strange. But what it meant was this: the boy was wasting, physically depleting, losing weight, losing color, losing the vitality that should have been restored by sleep. And nobody around him knew why. The first chapter of the Testament of Solomon, in Charles McCown's 1922 scholarly edition, describes the mechanism precisely. A demon named Ornias. He appeared at night, in the form of a winged being, and he would suck the vitality of the boy through his right thumb. Each morning, the boy woke exhausted, pale, confused in a way that was different from ordinary tiredness, not gradual decline, not illness with a name. Something being taken, Solomon noticed. And I want you to hold that detail for a moment. Not the demon, not the supernatural mechanism, the noticing. The entire edifice of Solomon's power over demonic forces, the ring, the command over spirits, the system that would eventually become the most referenced source in Western occult tradition, begins with a man who refused to accept that a child's suffering had no cause. That refusal is the first act of Solomonic wisdom in the text, not a spell, not a ritual, not knowledge. Refusal to accept silence as an answer. Now let me tell you what Solomon did. He prayed, and the archangel Michael appeared and gave him a ring. On the ring was a seal, and the seal gave Solomon the power to interrogate spirits, to compel them to identify themselves, to reveal their methods, and to name what would bind them. He called Ornias before him, and the demon came, and then Solomon did something that the text records with an almost clinical precision. He interrogated him, not cast him out, not destroyed him, interrogated him. He asked, "What is your sign? What do you do? How do you enter?" And this is the detail that matters most for what I'm showing you tonight. What can confound you? The entire Testament of Solomon is structured as a series of interrogations. Demon after demon called before the king, compelled to reveal not just their identity, but their diagnostic signature, their particular method of attack, the specific symptoms their presence produces, and the specific counter. It is a manual, written in the form of a narrative, a parent's manual, among other things. Because when you read through chapters 2 to 9 of the Testament, what you find is this: some of these entities specifically target children, not adults who have wandered into spiritual danger. Children. Ornias is the first. The mechanism: night wasting through the right side, the right thumb in the text, the vitality not taken during sleep. The child who cannot be restored by rest. Signs: exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, loss of vitality that has no medical explanation, the child pale and confused in the morning, as if the night took something instead of giving it back. Then there is Obizuth, a female entity described in the Testament as the killer of newborns and the cause of neonatal distress. The text records her self-description without sentimentality. She causes stillbirth. She causes children to come into the world, already carrying a weight the world did not put there. Then a demon of speech. The text specifies, causes stammering and delayed speech in children on their 8th day. The precision of that age marker is remarkable to any scholar who reads it. Not when they are young, not in infancy. The 8th day, a specific physiological threshold, a specific type of speech disruption. Not ordinary developmental delay, something that entered at a particular moment and attached to a particular function. And then there are unnamed entities the Testament describes as those who glide by means of a child's crying voice. They enter through the sound of distress itself. Read that carefully. The cry that does not stop. The infant inconsolable past the point where consolation should have reached it. The child whose crying creates its own opening. These are not monsters. They are descriptions. Specific, repeatable, recognizable. Solomon wrote them down. Now look at Proverbs, because here is something that most people who know the book of Proverbs do not notice. The entire first section, Proverbs chapter 1 through chapter 9, is addressed to a son. 23 times in those 9 chapters, the Hebrew beni appears. My son, 23 times. This is not a treatise on wisdom in general. This is a father speaking to a child, directly, urgently. And the warning system Solomon builds in those chapters is, I want to argue tonight, the second half of his diagnostic system. The Testament of Solomon describes what happens when something wrong enters. Proverbs describes the behavioral signs that tell a parent when something has shifted. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. The first diagnostic criterion is a child who has stopped hearing. Not a child who is disobedient in the ordinary sense. A child who has become suddenly, inexplicably unreachable. A child whose receptivity to the voices that have always reached them simply closes. Not through argument, not through teenage resistance, not through a fight, but as if a channel that was open has been quietly blocked. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 15. My son, do not walk in their way. Hold back your foot from their paths. The second criterion, sudden attachment to wrong companions. Not the ordinary drift of children toward different friendships. A specific, intense, exclusive new attachment to people who carry a particular weight. The child who was open to many relationships, suddenly and urgently oriented toward one source that something in the parent recognizes as wrong. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 25. You have ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof. The third criterion, the despising of correction. Not the refusal to be corrected. That is ordinary and developmental. The despising of it. The change in which correction itself becomes an offense, where the child who used to receive a parent's guidance even reluctantly now treats the attempt as something to be rejected with contempt that wasn't there before. And then there is Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down. The Hebrew word is da'aga. It does not mean ordinary sadness. It does not mean childhood moods. Da'aga is a heaviness that enters the heart and sits. The Targum translates it as weight. The Septuagint uses the Greek for grief. Solomon is describing something he recognized as a diagnostic indicator. A sudden, inexplicable heaviness in the spirit of a child. Not circumstantial sadness, grief at something lost, disappointment at something missed. Heaviness that has no named source. Heaviness that parents feel in a child before the child can articulate it. Heaviness that is different from what the household put there. 4 criteria. The child who stops hearing. The child who attaches suddenly to wrong companions. The child who despises correction. The child who carries an inexplicable heaviness. Solomon wrote all 4 of them down. Now I want to show you something that stopped me when I first saw it clearly. Because these diagnostic criteria from the Testament, from Proverbs, are not unique to the Jewish tradition. They appear again in independent form in 3 other traditions, and the appearance of the same cluster of signs in unrelated sources is not, in my professional judgment, coincidence. This is where the investigation becomes something else. In the Igbo tradition of southeastern Nigeria, the concept of Ogbanje describes a child who carries a spirit pact with what is sometimes translated as the other side. I grew up half inside this tradition. My mother's Nsukka family carried it without ever systematizing it as theory. It was embedded knowledge, the kind of thing that was simply understood. The Dibia, the Igbo spiritual physicians, the specialists trained in diagnosis and treatment of this kind of affliction, identified Ogbanje through a specific cluster of behavioral signs. These are not my summaries. These are the documented criteria in academic studies of Igbo traditional medicine. Prolonged inconsolable crying for no physical reason, not infant colic, not hunger, not pain that can be identified, crying that continues past all ordinary explanations, staring at things not visible to others, the child who looks into a corner of the room or at a specific point in the air with the focused attention of someone watching something intently, not the unfocused gaze of an infant. Focused, tracking, refusing food while appearing physically healthy, the appetite disappearance that has no medical basis, the child who ate yesterday and today will not eat, with no fever, no pain, no identifiable cause. Sudden personality changes. The child who was open becomes withdrawn. The child who laughed stops laughing. Not gradually, not through ordinary development, but as a shift that the parents can often name to a specific period. Extraordinary attachment to a particular object or place, and distress, notable disproportionate distress when separated from it. I want you to sit with that list for a moment, and then I want to return to the testament of Solomon's description of the boy with orneas attached to him, exhausted each morning, losing vitality despite apparent health, changed from what he was. The same cluster, different continent, different century, different language, different cosmological framework entirely, the same cluster. The Yoruba tradition adds the concept of Abiku, the born-to-die child, with parallel behavioral markers, the inconsolable crying, the staring, the food refusal, the attachment to specific objects. The Yoruba Ifa divination corpus, the Odu Ifa, the literary body of the entire Yoruba spiritual system, contains specific verses for identifying Abiku that describe the behavioral signs in exactly the same sequence that the Testament of Solomon describes the signs of demonic interference with children. I am not saying the traditions are the same. I am saying they are describing the same phenomenon, and that 4 independent systems, Jewish, Islamic, Igbo, Yoruba, arrived at the same diagnostic cluster without any documented mutual influence, is not something I know how to explain, except by taking seriously what they are all pointing toward. The Talmud adds a 3rd layer of evidence. Tractate Berakot, chapters 6 and 43. Tractate Pesakim, chapter 111. The rabbinic tradition identifies specific hours and conditions under which children are especially vulnerable to shedim, the Hebrew word for the category of spirits that operate in proximity to human life. The conditions are specific: nighttime, unsupervised, crossing of thresholds alone, doorways in particular, proximity to empty vessels. The Talmud repeatedly identifies hollow containers, jars, vessels, anything hollow, as objects through which a particular category of spirit can operate, and the Talmudic prescriptions for protection are equally specific. Iron near the sleeping child, not decorative iron, a key, a nail, any iron implement. The prescriptions are so old that the Talmud records them as pre-existing the text that records them. Rabbinic authorities, noting that this practice was already ancient when they wrote it down, the spoken declaration over the child before sleep. The Talmud preserves actual formulations, not prayers in the liturgical sense, but declarations. Statements of identity and boundary, the parent's name, the child's name, the household's name, a declaration that this child belongs to this household, and this household is under specific protection, and the prohibition against leaving children alone near cisterns, wells, or standing water. 3 independent categories of action, based on a specific understanding of how this category of interference operates, in darkness, through thresholds, through hollow objects, through the child's separation from their household. Solomon's entire system is the background context for these prescriptions. The Talmudic rabbis were inheriting and codifying what the Testament of Solomon had described 7 centuries earlier. The Islamic tradition brings Surah Al-Falaq, chapter 113 of the Quran. Say, I seek refuge with the Lord of the dawn, from the evil of what he has created, from the evil of darkness as it settles, from the evil of those who blow on knots, from the evil of an envier when he envies. Ibn Kathir, the great 14th century scholar of Quranic exegesis, identifies Al-Falaq as a parental protection surah, specifically recited over children at night, not because it is recommended as a children's prayer, but because its structure addresses exactly the category of interference that the Testament of Solomon describes for children. Darkness as it settles, the nighttime window, the hour when Ornius came, those who blow on knots, magical interference that targets the vulnerable. The Quranic phrase for a specific method of spiritual attack that works through concealment and the hidden tying of what should be free. And this, the Islamic tradition records that Solomon, was specifically taught what the Quran calls the language of that which afflicts. Not just the language of birds as Surah An-Naml describes, the language of what afflicts. The entire system of identifying demonic interference, how it enters, how it operates, how it presents in the human being who carries it, was, according to the Quranic tradition, among the specific knowledge given to Sulaiman. He was not given a general spiritual sensitivity, he was given a diagnostic framework, a language for reading what is happening when something enters a person and the ordinary instruments say, nothing is there. Let me tell you about Kwame. He was a third-year MA student at SOAS. Ghanaian, Birmingham-raised, Pentecostal background, the kind of student who could quote Karl Barth and was skeptical of anything that sounded like what his grandmother in Kumasi believed. He came to my office hours one afternoon in the winter, not about his dissertation, not about the academic work. He was carrying something else entirely. He sat down across from me and after a moment he said, "My daughter is 4 years old. For 6 weeks, she has been inconsolable at night. She wakes between midnight and 2 in the morning. She points at a specific corner of her bedroom, and she cannot be calmed for over an hour. The NHS has found nothing wrong. Physically, she is completely healthy." He paused. Then he said, "My mother in Kumasi, she said the word Abiku. I told her that was not helpful." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Last Thursday night, my daughter said a name none of us had ever given her, a name that is not in our family and not from any book or television she's seen. She said it 3 times in a row, clearly, as if she was calling someone. And then she went back to sleep, as if nothing had happened." He looked at me directly. "Is there anything in the texts?" he said. I had the Testament of Solomon on my desk. I turned to chapter 1. I read the opening passage aloud. I did not say yes or no. I did not offer a diagnosis or a reassurance. I just read what the text said. Kwame went very still. He sat like that for a long time. Then he said quietly, "That's exactly what's happening." I gave him the practical information, what the Talmudic prescriptions said, what Al-Falaq was designed to do, the specific declaration of household identity and boundary that the tradition prescribed. He wrote everything down. He completed his dissertation that spring. He never came back to ask about the daughter. I don't know what that silence means, whether she recovered, whether the nights quieted, whether the names stopped coming out of her at 2 in the morning. I never found out. And that not knowing is part of what I carry when I talk about this. The texts existed. The knowledge was there. A parent in distress was sitting across from me. Whether what I gave him was enough, I cannot tell you. But I can tell you what the texts say. And I can tell you that the language for what Kwame was describing existed for 3,000 years before the NHS decided there was nothing wrong. Let me give you the practical framework now, because the title of this video is a promise, and the promise is this. Solomon didn't just describe the problem, he also described what a parent does. 3 stages. The first stage is recognition. This is the diagnostic work. The 4 criteria I described from the Testament and from Proverbs. 1. Unexplained physical wasting or chronic fatigue with no medical explanation. The child who cannot be restored by sleep. The child who loses vitality that the night should replenish, but doesn't. 2. Night distress that doesn't resolve. Inconsolable crying past all ordinary explanation. Waking between midnight and 3 in the morning. The Testament specifically describes night as Orneus's operating window. Fear of a specific corner or object in the room. Not generalized darkness fear, which is developmental and ordinary. Fear of a specific place. 3. Sudden behavioral change. The child who was open becomes withdrawn. The child who laughed stops laughing. A specific intense attachment forms to an unusual object. Something that entered the household recently. Something that the child relates to with a quality of connection that feels different from ordinary childhood attachment to a beloved toy. Speech disruption. Not ordinary stammering, not developmental delay that the pediatrician would assess. Words that come out wrong in a way that feels external, not developmental. Or, and I note this because Kwame's daughter exhibited it, the child saying things that feel borrowed from somewhere else. Names not known to the family. Phrases that have a quality of not belonging to the child. These 4 together are the Solomonic diagnostic cluster. None of them alone is sufficient to draw the conclusion I am drawing tonight. Together, in combination with the quality of urgency and the absence of medical explanation, that is the pattern the Testament describes. The second stage is first response. This is where the Talmudic and Solomonic prescriptions are precise. The first action is spoken declaration. Orneus operated in silence and secrecy. The boy did not know what was happening to him. The household did not know. The mechanism required the family's ignorance in order to function. The counter is the spoken declaration of identity. Speak aloud in the room. Speak the child's full name. Speak your own name. Speak the names of those who protect this household, the ancestors if that is your tradition, God or the divine if that is your tradition, the specific archangels if that is yours. Speak the names out loud. This is not performance, it is not theatrical. The Talmudic rationale is this. The entity requires the anonymity of the household to operate. The spoken declaration of who this child is, who this household belongs to, and who stands as its protection. That declaration removes the anonymity the interference requires. The second action is iron. The Talmudic prescription is among the oldest in the text. A key under the mattress, a nail at the threshold, any iron implement. Iron appears in multiple ancient traditions as a specific counter to this category of interference. The reason given in rabbinic literature is precise. Iron belongs to the category of things the earth produces that precedes any demonic claim on a household space. You do not need to understand why it works to do what the prescription says. The third action is the spoken protection before sleep. Al-Falaq and An-Nas, Surahs 113 and 114, recited over the child before they sleep. Or Psalm 91, which contains the same structural declaration of protection. Say, I seek refuge with the Lord of the dawn. The act of a parent speaking protection over a child with intention, not because the words have magical properties, but because the act of a parent deliberately declaring protective boundary over their child is what the tradition describes as the act that establishes that boundary. The words matter less than the act. The act is a parent refusing to let the night have their child unchallenged. That refusal, clear, spoken, deliberate, is what the tradition prescribes. The third stage is for when the problem continues. If these actions do not resolve the pattern within a reasonable period, the tradition offers 2 additional interventions. The first, identify the object the child clings to abnormally and examine whether it entered the household recently. The Testament of Solomon describes objects as one mechanism through which certain entities gain proximity to a household. The specific language in chapter 5 is about objects that carry what was asked into them. An unusual attachment to an unusual object that entered the household at or near the time the disruption began is, in the Solomonic framework, a specific diagnostic flag. You do not need to destroy the object, you need to examine its history, and if the attachment is genuinely outside the range of normal, to move it out of the child's sleeping space. The second, speak the child's full name 7 times at the doorway of their room at sunrise. The morning threshold, the moment when the night's claims expire and the day begins its arc, is a specific reversal point in the tradition. The Testament describes Orneus operating in the hours of darkness and losing his hold at dawn. The doorway is the threshold of the child's space. 7 is the number the Solomonic texts consistently associate with binding and completion. The parent standing at that doorway, at the threshold of morning, speaking the child's name 7 times. The action declares the night's term ended and the child's identity restored to the day. These are not rituals requiring specialist training. They are specific, precise actions drawn directly from the sources. A parent can do all of them tonight. A parent who names what is wrong is already further than a parent who accepts that it has no name. That is not a spiritual claim. That is a practical observation. The parents who have watched these signs in their children and been told it's a phase, or they have anxiety, or this is normal for their age, those parents have been systematically robbed of a language that existed for millennia to describe exactly what they observed. The Talmudic rabbis knew it. The Dibya of Igbo land knew it. The Islamic tradition encoded it in 113 words. Solomon wrote the first version 17 centuries before any of them, and the opening gesture of that entire tradition was not a king on a throne. It was a man who looked at a boy wasting away each night, whom everyone else had accepted as simply unwell, and refused to accept silence as an answer, refused to accept that what was happening had no name, refused to let a child waste in the dark while the people around him continued working as if nothing was occurring that deserved explanation. He prayed. He received the ring. He called the demon before him, and he interrogated it. And when it answered, he wrote down everything it said, not for the academy, for parents, for the parent watching a child sleep with worry instead of tenderness, for Kwame sitting across from me in a cold SOS office in winter, writing in his notebook, for every parent who has stood at the doorway of their child's room in the small hours and known in the way that parents know things before they know why, that the word normal does not cover what they are seeing. The knowledge exists. The language is there. Solomon wrote it. He wrote it because a child was suffering, and he refused to accept that nothing could be done. That refusal was the first protection. It still is. What you do with it is up to you. Until next time, think about that tonight, or don't sleep at all.